Welcome back at WNST, and of course the NFL schedule. We're expecting it later this week. When you get that, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday as well. All of our WNST programming brought to you by Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast, tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land. To make sure you're using that Royal Farms app, just like Justin Tucker told you to. You'll get free fried chicken and, most importantly, the free Western fries. This guy is down in Charlotte, North Carolina. When the schedule comes out, we're going to have a trip, Ravens trip down to Charlotte. We took 6 buses down there the last time 8 years ago. We'll see how it goes this year. Certainly, that was a different version of the Carolina Panthers. He covers all things NFL nationally and internationally at Vinnie Iyer out on Twitter as well as at Sporting News, where they have team capsules and previews, getting everybody ready for next Thursday night. We welcome our defending champion, Vinnie Iyer, back onto the program. You can find him on Twitter. That's VINNIEIYER. What's going on, man? This is your favorite time of the year, right? You love the draft as much as anybody, I think.
Yeah, draft and schedule. And really what you get is the formulation of, oh, here comes the 2018 season. We've seen hints of it, and we've worked around the edges with free agency and power rankings and all that. But the draft and the schedule, okay, now it's real, and you can get excited for September.
All right, Ravens, first things first. Dez Bryant, I mean, that's the flavor of the day. Let's talk about this. And I keep saying, here's a troubled guy who's made a lot of money, who the Cowboys say, we don't want you or need you anymore, after they've dealt with all the shenanigans and the physical abuse and the press conferences and the shenanigans on the sidelines with Romo. I am always on eggshells when it comes to taking another guy who's a talented guy who has all that potential, and another team is saying, we're tired of your act.
Yeah, you look at this, and I said that looking at Dez Bryant, what he had left, I was throwing out 2 guys. One was Jordy Nelson, and one was Michael Crabtree, as guys who can go up and get the ball in the red zone, still can do that for you. They're not going to game break anymore. And I put Bryant right in that class. He can still catch the 1-yard touchdowns as well as anyone can, but he's not going to stretch the field. He's not really going to be close to a number 1 receiver, so you have to look at it that way. I think everything has been a bit inflated with his value to the Cowboys because he played for the Cowboys. So all that said,
yeah, let's not confuse him with Michael Irvin, right? Like, as far as anymore. Who he is, right?
Not anymore. I mean, at one point he was a legitimate number 1 receiver who could stretch the field, but now he's pretty much a receiver that you don't want to look at as a number 1. He's more of a complimentary guy. And what's really hard is, if you're the Ravens, do you want to start all over? You've just had this constant transition at wide receiver. You had Steve Smith, and then Mike Wallace is out, and Jeremy Maclin didn't work out. Now you have Crabtree in there. You really want to add more to this veteran carousel of question mark guys, where I think Crabtree still has plenty more left than Bryant at this point. So you got to weigh that if you're the Ravens. And at this point, I don't know if you want him on a team that you're contending or if you want him on a team that's rebuilding, because I think he could have a negative effect on both.
In the case of what is left for him, for Crabtree, for the Macklins, for the Wallaces, I'm convinced of those guys. Crabtree's probably the best of that pack, right? I mean, if I'm betting on a guy this year being a difference maker in this offense, being motivated, looked pretty motivated in Oakland, and obviously from Harbaugh's perspective, at least he played for his brother, right?
Yeah, and he's a little bit younger than those guys, and he is now is what he's always been. There's no hiding there. It's not like a guy that you're trying to fit in a different role. He's never been that guy that's going to go vertically and run a 4-4. He's going to make the catches, the tough ones, all the way to the end zone whenever you need him. So he's in the role that he needs to be in. And I think when we look at Dez Bryant, you look at all these teams that are thrown out. You look at the Cardinals and Bills and these really wide receiver desperate teams, but I think that's the wrong place for him. I think it has to be a team like Atlanta that has an established number 1 there and needs some red zone help. San Francisco could use a guy like that to finish a lot of short drives. And another team, you look at New England, they're always in the mix for these type of guys because all of a sudden Dez will be a 1,000-yard receiver again if he goes to New England, and that's usually how it works. So that's why you can't rule out the Patriots for a guy like that.
All right, Ravens at 16 on the clock right now. You've witnessed all this. We've talked about the wide receivers and making the offense better, giving some money to Hurst, allowing first Assembly, then Wagner to go. Now Ryan Jensen's gone. The Ravens have needs, and I don't, from a mock standpoint, I've seen McGlinchey, I've seen Ridley mock to them, but the thing that always stands out for me, and I know Ozzie always plays coy at the Liars Luncheon, is Ozzie likes to wheel and deal. Ozzie likes to trade back. Ozzie might like that center, or he might like that tight end out of Penn State. He may have a different wide receiver in a DJ Moore, maybe later on. Maybe there's something he's feeling later on to get some more picks into the second and third round. But McGlinchey and Ridley are the two names that we've talked about the most, because I think when you shake out the top of the board and all those quarterbacks and where the Roquans are going to go, where the Quentin Nelsons are going to go, that, there's a handful of guys that we could talk about. I would think they wouldn't go defense, but I've seen Marcus Davenport mock to them.
Yeah, there's so many options for the Ravens, and they're in a sweet spot there right in the middle of that round. And so many things could happen. You could have quarterbacks drop that cause a trade up the board into their spot. So they're sitting pretty here. For the Ravens, I wouldn't force your pick into the need that's most glaring. I think you just go with the best players that are out there. I think best player is going to help you. And the good thing for the Ravens is when you talk about wide receiver, if they go the pass rush route or offensive line route for the interior or right tackle, but you're looking at a lot of good values for where they're picking. So they can go many directions. They're one of the hardest teams to predict, frankly, in the first round because of that ability to move up and down the board and just take guys that maybe other teams are not as on or maybe it's not as a glaring need. So it's going to be fun to see what they do because I think they will have a big ripple effect on the second half of the first round. Well,
the ripple effect really begins at the beginning with all these quarterbacks, right? Like you have Davenport mocked to the Ravens probably because he fell down the board. I mean, most of my boards have him gone before it gets to the Ravens. That if they take a defensive player, it's going to be because somebody special sort of gets passed over, right?
Yeah, I think the teams that are more excited when there's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to go first round are the teams that don't have a quarterback because they know they're going to get their guy at a position that has less volatility, that they know is going to come through. They're going to get a safe pick. What you see is what you get and deliver offensively or defensively for you. So, so those teams are sitting pretty when you're just not forced to jump on any of these guys or make moves. And if I'm a team like the Giants or all the way down to maybe the Chargers or Steelers or Saints that have a quarterback for 2018, I'm not forcing the issue here because you're going to miss out on a lot of special guys in this draft at other positions.
Boy, you had Josh Allen mocked at 15 to the Cardinals, way down. Wyoming kid. I've seen him now be thrown around as the number one guy. Boy, the quarterbacks, man. I saw you out at the Combine, 2 months ago, and it's amazing how much movement there is after the season, after the Senior Bowl, after the Combine, and then after the actual workouts when a Baker Mayfield, who in the season was, a messy, sticky guy and crotch chopping and, all of that, he may have remade himself here for somebody to take a chance on him high up, right?
Yeah. I think when I look at the mock draft, I'm not a guy who does a lot of trades because it's more about what the team is going to end up with in the end. We don't care about where they move up and down the board, where they take a guy, but who fits them best is what we're looking for. And when you look at Allen, you see the Cardinals and the big arm there. I'm just a big Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson guy. I like it factor guys. I like high upside guys. And when you look at the Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, there's a bit of college disappointment in all of their careers that makes you shake your head, made a lot of mistakes in key games and put together the talent the way you would like. But you have guys like Mayfield and Jackson who came in with a chip on the shoulder and they went through the roof in what they were able to do. So I know people kind of like to bottle those guys as athletic or whatever, but there's a lot more to those guys. They're not going to be highly coveted if they're just running quarterbacks. We're well beyond that stage in the NFL.
Well, and I guess last year you would have loved Deshaun Watson if you're like an it factor guy. And, for all of these guys, there's always questions, there's always blemishes, there's always marks. A couple of these guys feel like they don't have that at all. Bradley Chubb feels that way. Certainly Saquon Barkley's going to be a guy that everyone's in love with and feels like they can throw him the ball, that he'll be okay in protection, and certainly he can run the ball. And Quentin Nelson, for a guard to be talked about in the top 10 is kind of crazy, but that's where he is.
Yeah, guard money is ridiculous right now at the moment. It's good to be a guard in the NFL. Andrew Norwell will tell you that. Goes from undrafted to the highest paid interior lineman in the NFL.
Ryan Jensen was almost unemployed this time last year. Look what happened to him. That's a center, right?
Yeah, I mean, Zach Martin can just count his money right now because Jerry Jones is pulling back all the Brinks trucks for him at this point. So guard is a nice little position. It's gotten a lot of play of late because it's guys who can dominate and really control the interior, just move a bunch of guys out of the way. Really, you're getting a guy that can play three positions sometimes with the way they can move to tackle and center when they're pulling and blocking. So Nelson is a can't miss as it gets. And you mentioned Barkley and Chubb, two guys that are pretty safe for me as well.
You have the Ravens passing on McGlinchey, passing on Ridley to take Davenport. Thoughts about Davenport? There's a guy, a Texas San Antonio, don't hear a lot, but everyone's in love with his ability to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, I just see upside there. I think with Ridley, I don't think it's as desperate to get a guy. Ridley is very good at what he does, but it's more of a slot route running type guy that he's going to be very good at that, but he's not going to give you maybe the upside you're looking for. Well, Davenport has got a ton of upside there as a pass rusher, and he can fit in a number of schemes, which is great because a lot of teams, whatever you're 3-4-4-3, it's really a hybrid type deal. And with the Ravens, I think he fits that mold for sure. And McGlinchey, I do like him, but I don't know how much you want to invest in him when you have some good values at tackle and guard beyond that spot for the Ravens. So I think they can still fill that position a little later, wide receiver as well, while the pass rushers are always in short supply and then high demand early in the draft.
All of our WNST coverage brought to you by Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches throughout Baltimore and Maryland. Every person at Howard Bank empowered to help you help yourself and get you ready. HowardBank.com. It's out there. Go check it out. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, tasty coffee, the best fried chicken anywhere. Gas up and pick up some snacks. Real fresh, real fast. Download the app. Make sure you're using that to gas up. You'll get free Western fries and, of course, some free fried chicken, which we can all use. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It also includes the Laurel entries for the race course this weekend. The Tessio running on Saturday. Huge stakes races all day Saturday. We're going to check in with Stan Salter later on in the week, getting you ready for the end of the Laurel run and the beginning of the Pimlico meet, which starts after the Derby Day. I'm taking my wife to Derby Day on the 5th. And then on the 19th, we'll have the Preakness, on the 18th, the Pink, and the Black-Eyed Susan. All that information now on the front of WNST.net and the Laurel entries there as well. Each and every Thursday, we do our Be More Positive community and charity series that is brought to you by Howard Bank, as well as our friends at Cole Roofing. We all felt that March wind coming in. If you have a commercial or corporate roof space, you need somebody to keep an eye on it. Certainly with the hot weather coming and the cracks that happen and the wind and the rain. Don't let it goof on your roof. You need Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. Billy Cole will be here later on in the week arguing about sports and the Orioles' dismal start and the Ravens draft coming up. Vinnie Iyer is our defending champion and our current guest right now. He is with Sporting News. He is a draftnik. You can follow him out at Vinnie Iyer on Twitter, where they have their draft previews coming down the pipe here as well. And, you made your point, Vinnie, on Davenport and on some of these other guys, but some other thoughts about some guys in the draft you like that maybe aren't top 10 guys. Give me a name or two or three that when you see those guys come off the board in the second or third round, you're going to say, I like that guy.
Well, one guy I really like is Cortland Sutton, and I hope the guy goes a little earlier, but big receiver. When you look at Classic, he can go up and get the ball over people and stretch field out of SMU. I really like him as being maybe... When you look at Mike Evans, I know he hasn't totally fit his potential there, but I think he has that kind of ceiling in the NFL. When you look at quarterback, you can go down the line. There's a whole bunch of guys, but I like Riley Ferguson there. I think he could be, in the right system, a very efficient and productive NFL quarterback because he's already has those responsibilities. He makes good decisions and all that. So that's a good thing to watch out for these teams that aren't so desperate for quarterbacks, but are looking for day 2 and day 3. And I have to shout out to a Northwestern guy here, Godwin Igwebuike, the safety. You go out and get this guy, you're going to have a guy who can do a little bit of everything in your secondary and just be potential leader on your team in a few years. So just a special guy with a lot of versatility, and it doesn't hurt when he went to school.
We've had a lot of conversations around here about the wide receiver position and where we are. We talk about Crabtree in the offseason and the addition. Ridley was a guy I had an eye on at the Combine. I guess the Ravens are a little shell-shocked through all of this, that they can't stop trying to draft wide receivers, even though they haven't been good at it for 23 years. And then you add on the extra that this is Ozzy's last draft. He's the only guy that's ever picked a football player. The notion that he's going to go his whole career and never really picked a good. The best wide receiver he's ever picked is Brandon Stokely, literally, right? I think you go back through this thing and say, why Ridley? Why not? Where would they be in the second round? And you mentioned Cortland Sutton and some other guys. I know around here, DJ Moore's another guy, but there is some trepidation just in general about taking wide receivers in the draft when you're in Baltimore.
Yeah, and there should be trepidation for everybody in the first round taking wide receivers. I mean, you look of late, it has been a disaster. The Bengals and John Ross. You look a couple years ago with Corey Coleman and the Browns and Josh Doxson and the Redskins. These guys have not been close to being first-rounders, and part of it has been injuries, of course, affecting. But
some of it, even the Amari Coopers are only flash it once in a while, right? Like you don't really get it, right?
Yeah, it's a very tough position because it requires a lot of nuanced things to be really special that you don't always see right away. Look at Antonio Brown. Nobody thought he was going to be this special, and a lot of people passed him up. So Odell Beckham Jr., you have to go back really in the first round with that draft with him and Evans where you really felt good about taking a wide receiver in the first round. So there are questions all the time about that position. I think corner as well, because these are speed, flash positions, but you got to have technique and ability to refine those skills if you're really going to make it work in the NFL.
Vinnie Iyer, our guest here and covering all things National Football League. He's down in Charlotte. By the way, the Ravens' schedule going to come out, we think, this week. They're playing in Charlotte. We will have a trip down there as well as the Kansas City, Los Angeles, Nashville, and Atlanta for the new stadiums and the cheap concessions and all that stuff. Fascinating that the Browns are going to win this draft, right? We know that. Next Friday and Saturday, it'll all be about Darnold or Rosen or Barkley or, Fitzpatrick, whoever they're going to wind up with. But they're going to wind up with two really good football players out of this thing.
Yeah, it's been a busy offseason for the Browns for sure, to say the least. Your old friend Tyrod Taylor is now their starting quarterback, so you look at... Joining
my old friend Hugh Jackson and all my old friends in Cleveland. A lot of my old friends went there to die, Phil Savage and George Kokinis and Mike Patton and on and we go down the list of all the poor people in purple that have wound up in Cleveland. Back to Dilfer even, right?
Yeah, it's a... there's some connection between the Cleveland Browns and Baltimore
Just a
Ravens.
little.
I can't quite put my finger on it. But,
we'll be able to find that in August when Ray Lewis goes into Canton.
Yeah. So it's going to be fun to see what they do. The Steelers, Bengals, and Ravens fans we know are going to be rooting against any success in this draft, but they have seemed to put things together, at least have an organized plan here with what they're doing with the quarterback and Jarvis Landry and having Josh Gordon in there and having Carlos Hyde in this mix. So they look more like a legitimate offense and defense than we've seen in quite some time. So these two picks are pretty critical. This is a team that the first step, as I've said, with the Browns, they got to pass the Bengals. And I think this could be the year that they pass the Bengals and say we have enough talent and guys that are coming together. You got to catch them first before the Steelers and Ravens can sweat in this division. So once they do that, I think that'll be big progress. Even if it's 5 or 6 wins here, if they're ahead of the Bengals, then the Browns are going in the right direction.
I'd love for them to have 5 or 6 wins as long as they're not against us. As long as they're against the Bengals and the Steelers, we're all good with it,
Yeah, and that could help. They could help you in the end. So you want them to be more competitive. I think this division is a lot better when all these teams are competitive. We know the rivalries are already intense regardless of what the records are, but you want the Bengals and Browns to be better overall, because I think in the end it makes the Steelers and Ravens better going forward as well.
Well, certainly it's been a lot of fun for the last 15 years as the Browns have stunk, but they're not going to stink forever. We talk about teams improving. Certainly the Rams and the Eagles looked pretty good last year. They're the winners so far, right, of this offseason. They're the two teams that have done the most, that have been the most intriguing. There'll be more of that to come next weekend as teams add players. I'm sure there'll be more deals going on down the line. But as far as improving teams that were already good, the Rams and the Eagles have already had a pretty successful offseason.
Yeah, you put them right up there with the Vikings and Saints as well with what they've done to improve their teams. And the NFC is going to be really hard. There's going to be some good teams left out of the NFC and not go to the playoffs. So you just can't be decent and 9 wins, 10 wins. That might not get it done in the NFC. That's how loaded this conference is. And two teams I'm going to watch out for that didn't make the playoffs. San Francisco, you have to. They haven't lost with Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's just talk about it factor and something special. He's definitely got it. And Chicago, I think Mitchell Trubisky could have that kind of a special feel, especially with now legitimate weapons around you at wide receiver and tight end. So that team had a pretty good defense. They could have a better offense here. Matt Nagy expect big things as a head coach. So Chicago and San Francisco, it's going to be tough with all those top-heavy teams in the division, but those two teams you're going to watch for a wild card for sure.
You know, I guess I don't say this often enough, and I probably should. Over 3 decades of doing radio here, you know, I'm a baseball fan, Vinny. You know that. I'm a hockey fan. You know, I like the NBA not as much as I used to. One of the reasons I don't like the NBA is there's only 2 or 3 teams every year that can win. Right here we are again. There's Cleveland. There's Golden State. You know, maybe you'll make a case for San Antonio. Maybe you make a case for Houston or somebody like that at this point in any given year. We're going to open up this NFL season again, right? Like over the next 10 days, we're going to have a schedule. We're going to break that down. There's going to be a lot of news. There's going to be a lot of rumors. It's going to be much more significant than anything that's going to happen in baseball. Hockey and basketball are playing their playoff games, and there's a lot of bad teams sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out who their coaches or who their leaders are going to be. Boy, the NFL, this time every year, you just said something positive about the Browns, about the 49ers. I mean, the Rams were a dreg in this league until last year, right? Like, so these the dreggiest franchises even have hope. The Eagles just won the Super Bowl, which I don't think most of my friends who are Eagles fans ever thought that was possible in their lifetimes, right? So you just made a good case for the Bears, who stink because they got a quarterback last year. So the thing I saw at the Combine, and not so much at the owners' meetings because it's a bunch of rich people and it's more rules and all of that and the business of the league. But now that we focus back on football, this is the sport, much more so than maybe anything outside of college basketball, where the little UMBCs and the Loyolas of Chicago can shock the world a little bit. But boy, 32 teams next week get together, and every one of them goes on the clock, except the Rams without picks and stuff. But all of them have some semblance of, we can win 11 games and we can be the Eagles next year, or we can be the Jaguars who went from nothing to something. Boy, this league offers promise in a way that sucks people in. Even when you're a Ravens fan and you don't feel good about the team right now and you don't feel good about the offense, you feel like, you know, Ozzie might have 2 Hall of Famers in him next weekend. It's possible. You know, it's possible. And I think for all the teams, 10, 11, 12 wins is in the mind frame of everyone, including the Browns right now, that this league, if you're a fan of any team, you can be positive. And that's really not true in sports in general, really.
Yeah, and the one thing about the Super Bowl is that once the Eagles walked off the field as champions, and it wasn't the Patriots, the big bad Patriots winning again, and we saw what the Falcons did the previous year on the brink of it, I think that hope was restored, that parity was restored, where the Eagles, look where they were, look what happened to them in the season, losing their quarterback, they were still able to win this. Why can't that be us? And I think that question may not have been asked several times over, but when you look at the Eagles and the Jaguars and Rams, and now everyone is saying, why can't we be that team? That's why you see a lot of teams, even if they had some moderate success last year, made some changes, and they want to be that team. And I think now everyone has that hope, and that's what the draft represents.
He is Vinnie Iyer. You can find him out at Sporting News. Daily capsules coming out each and every day, including his mock draft up there at Vinnie Iyer on Twitter as well as at sportingnews.com. Vinnie, always great to visit with you, man. I'm looking forward to our trip down to Charlotte. You're going to give me a good restaurant tip, I'm sure, when I get down there, and we'll see what date that happens. We're going to be doing bus trips down Charlotte and Atlanta on our ticker for the NFC South this year, for the AFC North this year. So I get my Norths and Souths and East and West all mixed up. Great to have you aboard, my friend. Buckle up. It's going to be a fun ride this week.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nestor. Appreciate it.
You got it. Vinnie Iyer, one of our favorites from sportingnews.com. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. We will have some breaking news around here for sure with the schedule, with the draft picks, the Orioles getting the Norfolk shuttle together as they play in Detroit this week and then come home to take on the Indians. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.